Good morning, everyone. And it still is morning by about a minute, I believe. Welcome to our public meeting today. My name is Charlie Barker. I'm a member of the leadership steering team for the Richardson Interfaith Alliance. First and foremost, I want to thank First United Methodist Richardson for opening up this beautiful space for us to have this meeting. So thank you, thank you, thank you. The Richardson Interfaith Alliance, better known as RIA, was formed in 2012. The Alliance serves to increase respect of all faiths through education and increased awareness, while coordinating and enhancing faith-based services for the betterment of the Richardson community. We meet monthly at various houses of worship and share a meal with each other and usually a speaker. Since the formation of RIA, we've truly become a community of friends. We're pleased to co-sponsor today's meeting with the League of Women Voters of Richardson. The League of Women Voters of Richardson is a nonpartisan, grassroots civic organization that encourages informed and active participation in government. The League works to increase understanding of major public policy issues and influences public policy through education and advocacy. The League and Richardson Interfaith Alliance never supports or opposes a political party or candidate. The purpose of this meeting, titled, Is My Vote Secure in Dallas County, is to answer questions about some of the processes the Dallas County Elections Department have in place to make sure that every ballot cast in Dallas County in any election is secure. This includes elections at the federal, state, and local levels. This meeting is being videoed and will be uploaded to the League's website and also to YouTube. Ellen Stinger, President of the League of Women Voters Richardson, will now introduce our speaker. Ellen.
Thank you, Charlie. It is an honor to be co-sponsoring this important meeting with the Richardson Interfaith Alliance, so thank you. We are pleased to have several people from the Dallas County Elections Department with us today. Obviously, our speaker, Mr. Michael Scarpello, who is the Dallas County Elections Administrator. And we also have Esmeralda Garcia and also Laura Varela. Thank you very much. Mr. Scarpello holds a Juris Doctor from the University of Nebraska College of Law and a bachelor's degree in business administration. He has been a member of the Nebraska State Bar Commission, where he was bar certified and National Association of Election Officials certified as an elections administrator. Mr. Scarpello has 20 years of experience in election services and management. Prior to coming to Dallas County, Mr. Scarpello served in Nebraska as the Chief Deputy Election Commissioner and Elections Manager. He served in Colorado as the Director of Elections, in California as the Registrar of Voters, and most recently in Arizona as the Vice President of Election Management Systems. Mr. Scarpello came to Dallas County Elections Department on December 7th, 2020. The Richardson League of Women Voters has given questions to Mr. Scarpello prior to this meeting. So Mr. Scarpello, if you're ready, we'll begin. First question, how is my personal information used and protected during the election process?
Well, first off, I'd want to say thank you for inviting me here, Alan, and thank you for bringing me to this beautiful facility, and which this facility we're going to be using as a polling place for this next election. So,
and that's hot off the press, I think.
It is.
So everybody take note of that.
So, how's your personal information used and protected? Of course, when you register, the first thing you have to do to participate in an election is to register to vote. And you send that information in typically either on paper or, in Texas on paper, and we take that information and it's entered into our, what we call VMAX. It's our voter registration system. And then that information is uploaded into the statewide team system, voter registration system. And so that information is, during that process is, protected in many ways, but encrypted between, as far as the movement of data between locally and at the statewide level. And of course, voter registration information is what we call personally identifiable information, PII. And so anytime there's PI, we take extra precautions to make sure that information is protected. And then, of course, in order to vote, that information is taken and put into what is called the electronic poll books. And so that information is loaded onto the electronic poll books, distributed to the 450 plus voting locations, where our poll workers access the information to allow someone to see if they're qualified to vote. Those e-poll books are connected to our office live, but they're done, I think there's multiple layers of encryption, and there's also a VPN tunnel, very technical, but that is all equipment that's certified by the federal government as well as the state government in order to make sure that information is secure.
Okay. And that is the check-in is the only place that there's any transfer or any connection between the Dallas County elections and the polling place.
That's correct. There's three pieces of equipment, or multiple pieces of equipment at a polling place. You have your cradle point, which is your how we connect to how the polling place is connected to us. It's basically a cradle point it's using Verizon and AT&T to talk to us. Because some locations Verizon's better, some locations AT&T is better. So it uses both. And then, so that cradle point is how we connect. And then there's the electronic poll book, which is connected to us. But then after you're issued your ballot, you're given your ballot and you vote on a voting machine, not connected to anything. And then the ballot is put into a vote tabulator, not connected to anything. So the only piece is the electronic poll book that's connected to the internet.
Okay.
And that's through an encrypted tunnel.
Next question. When checking in during the in-person voting, the county's database is checked wirelessly, which we just went over, via the internet to verify that the voter is a registered voter. What happens if the electronic connection is down? Can the person still vote?
The answer is yes. The systems are designed and certified by the state and federal governments to anticipating that to be a problem. And so what happens is the information is on each e-poll book, as well as connecting to other e-poll books throughout the county, so that we can know whether or not someone is trying to vote in two locations. They're constantly updating in near real time. And so if they go down, though, you can still pull up the information from the electronic poll book. We still can allow you to go ahead and vote.
So if the connection is down and the person votes, and then they decide for whatever reason they want to go to a different polling location, will they catch that person then?
Yeah, I kind of compare it to like if you think of a railroad crossing, and you have the arm that comes down at the railroad crossing, and that prevents someone from crossing the railroad tracks. The electronic poll books being connected and being able to tell that someone's trying to vote somewhere else is that guard. Now, if that guard happens to be broken and not come down, we'll know later on. And so imagine, if you will, at a railroad crossing, if there was not only an arm, but a camera. And the camera would say, hey, this guy crossed, and let's issue him a ticket. And so we would do that same thing, knowing that someone, in fact, voted twice, because they'd be recorded, and then they would be reported to the authorities.
Okay, but they would not be allowed, their vote would not count twice.
Well, in that particular case, they would.
Okay.
In that rare circumstances where something would go down and someone would go to another location, it could happen.
Okay, but that is against...
That's against the law.
Yeah, okay. Third question. What prevents someone who voted absentee from voting in person?
So I told you those are connected in real time, or near real time. And so when someone receives an absentee ballot, a mail ballot, it's marked in the electronic poll book. So if they come in and say, I'm here to vote, we say, well, you've already been issued an absentee ballot. And thus, they might say, well, no, I didn't, or I never received it. Well, then we let them vote, but they vote a provisional ballot. And a provisional ballot is a regular ballot that's then held on to until, and it's put in an envelope, it's brought back to our location, and it's held on to until after we tabulate all the ballots, we do balance the books, and if we see that they haven't cast a ballot in some other way, then we'll go ahead and count it.
Okay. With a provisional ballot, do they have to come to the elections office to prove they are who they are, or is there anything that they have to do afterwards?
No. They fill out a provisional ballot envelope, they sign, et cetera, and that's all they need to do.
Okay.
Now, they can find out later, they can log into the state system to find out whether or not their provisional ballot was counted.
Okay, excellent. How are voting machines tested and made secure?
So there's multiple voting machines. Every one of those 3 different voting machines are, certified by the state. Then prior to an election, each one of them goes through a logic, what's called prescribed by law as a logic and accuracy test. And so there's certain requirements that you have to go through to make sure that machine is operating properly and that it's counting those ballots properly.
Okay. How often do electronic voting machines get audited? And what do we mean by audited?
Well, every election, it would be that logic and accuracy test. Okay. And it gets very technical using hash values, et cetera, et cetera. Some of that above my head, but the technical folks know. And like I said, everything is prescribed by the Secretary of State and the state of Texas before those systems are certified.
Okay. And then is it county election employees who test these machines?
That's correct. Well, keep in mind that our staff is fairly small, and we grow to a much larger organization. So we hire temp agencies. We bring in temps from the outside from temp agencies as well as from our election vendor. And they work as a kind of a grand team to prepare all that equipment.
I'm skipping a question here. Number 6, what safeguards are in place to make sure that all security measures actually happen?
It's the law. And then, of course, we have things like the Secretary of State now conducts an audit after the election. We're in the middle of an audit from the 2020 election right now. And there's just certain requirements that every election official must do, and they're held accountable if they don't.
And who holds them accountable?
The Secretary of State, the Attorney General, the local district attorney's office.
So you don't want to get in trouble?
No.
Okay. I'm skipping another question.
Okay.
What are the rules governing poll watchers?
So there was a new law passed this last year called SB 1, Senate Bill 1. And Senate Bill 1 provided poll watchers with much more authority than they've had in the past. And that's caused a little bit of concern with poll workers, because the poll watchers now can basically do almost anything they want, where they can have unfettered access to watching the entire voting process. On the one hand, that's good. On the other hand, there is some concern by some folks that the poll watcher can, intrude on the privacy of a voter. And so there's finding that balancing act. And our approach has been to our poll workers in our training to say, listen, poll watchers are there to do their jobs. You're here to do your jobs. You need to get along. and let's we're all here, we're all professionals, and let's not do anything to raise the temperature and cause controversy. And one of the reasons that's important is that a poll worker now, under the new law, they can actually get in trouble. You know, the law has a lot of teeth into it, where a poll worker, if they obstruct the view or prevent a poll watcher from doing their job, that they can, you know, have civil penalties and potentially criminal penalties.
So a poll watcher can be there the whole time that early voting or election day voting.
Poll watcher could be there from the time we walk in the door to the time we leave, and they can watch every activity at that location.
So that would include when the voting is over at the end of the day and the election judge is counting up or
That's
doing whatever
correct.
paperwork.
That's
needs to be
correct.
done. Okay. If anybody feels that the election worker has overstepped their bounds or has been able to see their personal or see how they voted or whatever, what would they do? Do they have a recourse?
For the
For
voter?
The voter.
Well, at every location, we have certain required signage at the location. And on one of those signs there's multiple places where a person can report an infraction, whether it's a poll worker, poll watcher, voter, et cetera. And they can report to the federal government. There's a number provided. They can report to the Secretary of State. They can report to the local district attorney, or they can report to us. So that's a requirement of the state law that says give those voters or whoever is at that location the option to report an infraction.
Okay. I have some more questions. I have talked with Mr. Scarpello ahead of time, and he said he would like to just maybe make some general statements. I will give him time to do that at this point. If anybody has questions, once he's finished with that, you can come to the lectern and ask your question. And if not, then if nobody has many questions from the audience, then I will finish my questions, if that's okay.
Okay, great. So I just wanted to, there's been a lot going on in elections, and so I wanted to just kind of race through and tell you, what's going on in our office. 2022 has been an incredibly busy year. Our state of Texas election officials will tell you this is the busiest year they've ever remembered. We had a March 1st joint primary election. We had a May 7th countywide election. We had a May 24th countywide election and a June 18th runoff. So that's an unprecedented machine gun approach to elections that is very difficult for election officials. And then, of course, we got the upcoming November 8th general election. In addition to all that, there's a lot of other factors, some self-induced and some forced on us by other factors that have made us extraordinarily busy also. And so I was brought here in 2020, or basically the beginning of 2021, to really take a hard look at how we do business in Dallas and to kind of turn the organization upside down to try to modernize it. And so we've been looking at every aspect of how we do business, from the facilities to the equipment to our services, our technology, hardware, our software applications, our processes and procedures, and our organizational design. And we continue to, that's an ongoing process that will take years, frankly. This last year we had a brand new, so some other outside factors then too. This last year we had a new language requirement for the Vietnamese language. So now we have to provide all of our materials in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese, and that's by federal law, but by the order of the Department of Justice, after there's a determination made that there's up to 5% of the county that speaks Vietnamese. So in theory, we could have more languages in the future. And so we have to, that was a big conversion for us to do our website, all of our signage, everything we produce has to be in 3 languages now. This last year we had redistricting after the federal census. All of the census was pushed back this last year, which meant that all the lines from the the Secretary of State's, the legislature and the county, all their dates were pushed back, and so everything was compressed to us. After they're all done drawing up all their lines, then we have to redraw our precincts. Historically, that had been done by an outside firm. That outside firm's not available anymore, and so we had to do all that internally. And then we have to upload all those lines into our voter registration system, and then upload all of our lines into the state system. So it's an incredibly complex process, and so we had to do that all in the time frame of basically December, January. And then we had to do it again after the cities re-precincted or did new lines for their local offices, and they're doing that probably in 2 or 3 different waves. So very busy year as far as our redistricting. Records management has been incredibly busy for us. I'd mentioned that we're doing the Secretary of State audit of the 2020 election. That's been pretty intense. We're in 5 different lawsuits related to a variety of things, but mostly involving new legislation from the legislature. And as a county, we have to be a part of those, even though in many cases I might have been against that particular, personally been against some sort of legislation. I'm a defendant because I'm the local election official. And then this avalanche of public records requests. Every election official in the country that I know is getting pummeled with, like I said, an avalanche of public records requests. There's these organizations that are just blasting these PIAs out, and we've had hundreds of them. And so that's been a real problem for election officials because it distracts us from our real jobs, and that's running elections. And then we've built a new election warehouse and training facility, and that's been pretty intense, trying to get that up and running. It was supposed to be done in January of this last year, but because of supply chain issues and stuff, it's been pushed back, and we're opening it now. We just opened it this week, in fact, where we're actually doing our training out of the new facility, so we're pretty excited about that. The SB 1 changes from the legislature made, implementing those. When you have a new law, that's just the beginning, because then the legislature the Secretary of State's office puts out interpretations of that law and how do you implement it. And so they have what they're called election advisories and other webinars, et cetera. And in the lead up to the primary election last year, I think we had 46 of those communications in the last 80 days. The last one coming basically the day before the election. So every time one of those happens, you have to review and revise all your processes to make those changes. So that was pretty intense going into the primary election. Some of those include some of the highlights of that SB 1 is new central count. I see Mike Slayton over here, our alternate presiding judge of central count. And Mike's seen the changes that we've made, some because of SB 1, some because we're just trying to be more poll watcher friendly. We've got a beautiful central count facility, probably the best in the state, frankly. And it's live streamed. You can watch the entire process live because of SB 1. It mandates that we stream anywhere there's a ballot handled. Then there's been mail ballot changes regarding SB 1, which now people have to include either their driver's license or their last 4 of their social security number. That's caused some consternation because there's been a higher rejection rate in the past. As a county, we've done many things to mitigate those, and the county commissioner's court was generous enough to spend some money to try to communicate with those people who've had issues, and so we think that we've kind of mitigated a lot of those issues, and it's getting better. Our rejection rates are going down. Labor challenges. I think we've all experienced it when you go to your local restaurant or anywhere else, frankly, these days where there's just a shortage of labor. Well, we aren't exempt from those shortages. We use a lot of temps from temp agencies. They've struggled to supply people to us. I think between vacancies, shortages of labor, ice storms, et cetera, this last March election, we had a shortage of 11,890 hours, missed hours. And so what that meant is that people like Esmeralda and Laura worked really, really long hours to try to make up for that. Poll worker shortages, we experienced those same things in March. And so we did a lot of things to try to correct that. We increased judge pay from $18 to $20 an hour, probably the highest paid judges in the country, frankly. We started to pay for training classes for people to attend training. We introduced a new countywide or county employee poll worker program so that we could use county employees as backups in case we have shortages. And then we've recruited more nonpartisan poll workers. Poll workers typically come from either party. So we figure there's probably 25% of the population that we're leaving money on the table. So we're trying to recruit more of those nonpartisan poll workers. And then the last thing we did for the summer elections was to consolidate some polling places. We cut basically 40 polling places. Now going into the November election, we'll go back up to our standard number of countywide polling places. So then the other thing we did was the March joint primary election. This was the first joint election in Dallas's history. And there was a lot of benefits, mostly benefits for voters, because voters could go to the same locations they always go to, knowing and vote the same way they always voted, rather than I would go to the Democratic line or the Republican line, or revealing how they vote. Give me a Democratic ballot. It was all done discreetly. So a lot of benefits to the voters, benefits to the political parties, mostly in the state. The state pays for a primary election, and they only pay our poll workers $12 an hour. But because it was a joint primary election, the Commissioner's Court actually paid the balance between $12 and $18 for those judges, and between $12 and $16 for our clerks. So it helped us retain more people. It also helped the parties in other ways where we did the work to recruit polling places and pay for the polling places, et cetera, et cetera. So we did all the administrative work that the parties normally would have had to do. In 2022, we introduced a lot of vote center modifications, those things that take place at the polling place. We had new signage. I'm sure you've probably seen the new official vote center signage rather than using the term polling place. This coming election, we're going to have some actually more signage where we have these feather flags, the ones that kind of flop in the wind, to bring more attention to those locations, plus some internal signage at our early voting sites, to directional signage it's going to just look a lot nicer than it's looked in the past. We have a new e-poll book monitoring system where we can actually, those e-poll books I talked about, where we're monitoring as they come on, and if they're not coming on, we're calling those locations saying, how come you're not up and running? So we're actively trying to get these locations to open in a timely fashion. We've got our new vote center procedures to try to make things much smoother at a polling place. And then this last year, we created a new training program to go along with that that's much more streamlined and modified from the past. We also have a new judge application. We've now distribute official county phones to every judge so that they can, instead of using their own phones, they use our phones. And on that phone, we have a couple different applications. One is a judge app where it walks them through the process, step by step, of processing a provisional ballot voter. And that's critical because in 2020, we had a 50% error rate on our provisional ballots by our poll workers because the provisional process is very difficult. And so providing that tool is really helpful. And then we had new GIS, use of GIS logistics to track our deliveries, to track our inspectors, to route in a much more efficient manner everything we do. And then and a new electronic inspector tools. We have inspectors that go out around 10 to 12 locations to inspect to make sure that the poll workers are doing what they're supposed to do. And we use electronic tracking for that to make sure, so we can track in real time what's going on out in the field. And then our newest internal modifications coming into this next election, we're continuing to refine our analytics program. We use analytics for everything we do. I always tell my staff, you should have paid attention in math class, because everything's measured. And most importantly, at the polling place, it's important to use proper analytics so that you can have the proper amount of equipment, the proper amount of people at those locations. And in the past, in most places, frankly, it's just kind of done by gut. Well, historically we think we need this, but we have a very sophisticated program where we try to project what those numbers are, so that we can be, and that means less lines because we got the proper equipment, and we don't over allocate and we don't under allocate. That's the goal, and so less lines and saving money. We have this year we're doing a new safety and security program after the shooting in Uvalde. There's a lot of concern of churches, schools, et cetera, and so we're, for the first time, have this new safety program that we're bringing all the law enforcement, all the security plans of all these polling places together to try to make sure that we can be responsive if we have something bad happen. We've got new payroll modifications. Paying historically has been done literally by people on calculators, adding up timesheets and hand entering everything, and we've tried to make that a much more streamlined process now to make it using electronic calculations with spreadsheets, automatic imports, et cetera. Very complex, but hopefully to pay our people in a more timely fashion. Our communications department, Esmeralda and Laura, they've been around for a long time. And they're kind of a jack of all trades, trying to do everything for us. And we've been really putting a lot of efforts into our communications group, hiring more people within that because it's so important. We got a new communications manager. We've got a new intern program. We're trying to bring more interns in, young people to help us spread the word, attend events like this, et cetera. A much more aggressive VDR program, our voluntary deputy registrar program. That's what Esmeralda heads up, and this year she's got events all over town, all over the county, trying to get people registered to vote. Increased outreach and education to the communities, trying to get out to events like this a lot more. Increased presence on social media. We're doing a lot more with social media now. We've got newsletters that go to our VDRs, new newsletters, and into our poll workers. We've got a much more aggressive media strategy, working with the media to try to get the free media to try to help spread the word. Something new that we're developing right now is rumor control. In elections, there's huge problem with misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. And so with our rumor control on our website and through social media, we're going to try to answer those problems immediately to try to dispel these rumors, because we really need to try to get people to trust elections a little bit more. And those rumors are just killing us nationwide. I mentioned the use of analytics. We do that same thing with our media, testing our media to see how effective it is. We're making some minor website modifications. After this election, we're probably going to start from scratch and rebuild our website from the ground up. But right now, we are modifying it to try to make it a little more user friendly. And then, most importantly, we've got the Commissioner's Court generously supplied $605,000 to our department for a public relations campaign. And so you're going to see TV ads, radio ads, social media, and mail campaigns to try to educate people about how to vote and where to vote. We converted over to the new system, in 2019, where we go to vote centers plus new equipment, but we really never educated the public about that much. And so now we are. And it's really critically important because people are tending to go to certain locations, and there might be a location a block away, a polling place, and they're not, and that one's super busy and the other one's not. And so what we want to educate people is before you go vote, go to our online tools, our GIS tools that say, here's where you can go, and here's the wait times, and so you don't have to be in line. And so that's, we're pretty excited about that. And the fact that the Commissioner's Court was so generous with that money was great. Our training department, I talked about the new facility. They're refining their trainer program. We redid it last year, but we continue to refine it. We've got new equipment, videos. So almost all of our training is live, recorded. So it's consistent and thorough. And for certain elections, we'll offer it online. For this election, everyone has to come in person. Our voting sites department, we got a new voting sites manager, new people, a new judge appointment and placement process. And to go with that is new software, where we have the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, us, Commissioners Court members and stuff. They're all a whole bunch of chiefs trying to place poll workers, and we're all operating on different equipment. And so we've built this software where everybody can see what's going on at the same time, so we don't have such confusion with our poll workers. And so we're rolling that out now. Our central count department, I talked about the central count and Mike over there and the new layout, but there's also a lot of behind the scenes, how do we proof our ballots? How do we make things better within that department, including our chain of custody? What we're finding from the 2020 audit is the chain of custody of making sure things are moving and documented wasn't as accurate as it needed to be, so we're doing a lot of modifications to chain of custody. We're moving away from our reliance on our vendor, our election vendor, ES&S, had basically done all of our work in central count. And we're saying that's really not appropriate, plus it's incredibly expensive. Where we're taking on those responsibilities and using the vendor more appropriately as a consultant rather than a doer. Our election hardware, the people that prepare all that equipment and machinery, we've kind of rebuilt the way they, the proper use of checklists and making sure that equipment is programmed in a more efficient and effective way so that we don't have as much equipment out on the field we have problems. Our GIS department, I mentioned that. We use GIS. We have 2 great GIS people, and we're just building all sorts of internal applications, but externally, what you guys will see, the most obvious one is that polling place lookup. And there's a mobile version to use on your phone that will actually give you driving directions to a location, and there's also, and it'll tell you what the wait times are, and there's also a desktop version of it also. Our IT department, we just completed an audit. We talked about security. I can tell you that in my past jurisdiction in California, we were hacked, and it's not a pretty sight. And so you have to prepare to not get hacked. And so we went through a Department of Homeland Security audit recently to try to harden, and our IT department continues to harden all of our systems. And so that's a lot of work, but we feel really good about that. Great cooperation and help from our county IT department. So those are kind of our improvements. We've got the upcoming gubernatorial election coming up November 8th. There's going to be 50 early voting sites. We are not going to have any mega sites. In 2020, there were some mega sites at American Airlines Center. We won't be doing that this year because the biggest reason is in 2020, the Mavs weren't playing because of COVID. But they are playing now, and so we'd have access to those locations. So we'll have 50 early voting sites and our standard, roughly 450 election day vote centers. And that's really all I had to say, except to say that, we're continuing to look for people to help us, either become a poll worker, to be a temp worker, to come help us, as we grow from 50 staff, full-time staff members to 200 or 300 part-time staff members, as well as we have some full-time positions that we're recruiting for right now. We're looking for a full-time Vietnamese language coordinator. We're looking for a purchasing clerk. We're looking for a public communications coordinator, a facilities lead in our voting sites department, and another facilities person within that department. So that's all I had. So I'll be glad to take questions.
Let me ask you two questions that came up while you're talking. The league is very interested in doing voter registrations, and you said that voter registrations rejections are becoming less and less. Can you tell us what are the main things why you would reject a voter registration?
Well, actually, what I was talking about was mail ballot applications.
Oh.
So mail ballots,
Sorry.
because of SB 1, mail ballot applications now need to contain certain information that they didn't need to contain before.
Right.
And when they don't have that, we have to reject it. And then when the mail ballot itself comes in, if it doesn't contain that same information that matches up, basically you got your voter registration, you got your application, and you got your ballot. And all three of those pieces have to contain the same information. The problem is that someone might fill out an application with their driver's license number, but then they fill out their ballot and they don't put their driver's license number, they put their last four of their social security. And if those two don't match up, then it's rejected. And so that's what we're trying to reach out and try to help them correct those. As far as voter registration applications, those are pretty rare that those would ever be rejected. But that's one of the reasons it's so important that Esmeralda works with these voluntary deputy registrars, that they receive the proper training and they work with someone who's filling it out to make sure they're filling it out properly.
Right. And we always try to make sure that they put both the last four of their social and their driver's license.
We say when in doubt, fill them both out.
There you go.
Give us both.
And one other quick question. You said that 40 polling locations were closed in a recent election. What goes into the decision to decide which ones close?
Well, by Texas state law, there's a prescribed procedure that says that you have a vote center advisory committee that meets, studies these locations, and then they make a recommendation to the commissioner's court, who then makes the final decision. And so that was done in 2019. When that process was done, there really wasn't a lot of contemplation. They basically at the time said, if it's a polling place, it's going to be a vote center. And so we have a lot of inefficiency there, where we'll have a vote center on one side of the street and one directly across the street. Because in the old precinct model, that was required. I can tell you that I've got a long history with vote centers. Vote centers began in Colorado, and when I was in Colorado. And so a vote center, the concept is that you don't have as many polling places, but you have better polling places. And you have places like this that have great parking, have great ADA access, as opposed to some of our locations that are just not that great. And so going forward, what we will do after this November election is we will reconvene the Vote Center Advisory Committee, and we will use those analytics to really analyze all of these locations. We will spend a lot of time to go to each location with our iPads and our cameras and gather the critical statistics about those locations, what their square footage is, pictures of the location, how many parking spaces, not how many parking spaces, how many available parking spaces, because if you have 100 parking spaces and 98 are filled, you have 2. And so available parking spaces, available power requirements, internet connectivity, et cetera, et cetera. So we will give that to the Vote Center Advisory Committee. We'll go through that process where they will analyze for the long term how many polling places should we have, or vote centers should we have in Dallas County. And my suggestion is going to be that you really should have a model where you look at a kind of a high turnout model versus a low turnout model. because if we have these summer elections where we have 6% turnout, and then we have a presidential where we have 70% turnout. And so using the same model for both doesn't really make a lot of sense. And so, but we'll see. That'll be the recommendation of the Vote Center Advisory Committee and ultimately with the Commissioner's Court.
Thank you. Would you like to come up? If anybody else has a question, you can come up and to the podium. Sure. You're being recorded over there.
First, I'm Tilly Perkins. I'm on the Dallas County Republican Executive Committee. Let you know who I am. I have two kind of short questions. The first is about the DS-200 count machine. I know back in the primary, there was a number of those that went down, and I happened to be in a location, and it went down as I was trying to put my ballot in. It was frustrating for, of course, the judge and the workers, and then I hung around, and the Dallas County elections worker came. It was frustrating for them. And so my question is, when you store those machines, are they checked before you come back and use them again? There seems to be like there was something that was dropped during that time. Or how are those stored? Are they checked before they're brought out again for elections?
Right. So we had 3 different warehouses within our county, and they were all over the place, right? And basically only one of them on 1520 Round Table Drive was a usable one. The other ones were just kind of places to store junk. And that was true for the primary election. That's one of the reasons that we built our new warehouse training facility right in we have a campus. It's right across the parking lot. And with that new facility, we have the ability to stretch out and have all of our equipment laid out in a more organized fashion, and so that it can be stored and the equipment can be prepared better. And so for the primary, we still didn't have that. And plus we had the shortage of labor that we couldn't get the temp agencies to, we had to keep raising the price. We were only paying by our contracts, we can only pay people $12 an hour, and I think 15 at the most. Well, since that election, now we have new contracts with a tech company where we're paying $35 an hour. We're getting better quality people to help us prepare that equipment. We've got the room to lay it out now. And so there's more preparation that and the proper use of checklists now that we've never historically used checklists to prepare the machines. It was a lot of institutional knowledge. And so now we have everything documented, every single piece of equipment. There's a checklist with a signature on the bottom, so there's accountability. And so the summer elections, we didn't have some of those same problems because we were just getting into those new facilities, and we had the implementation of the checklists. And so going into November, I don't anticipate near the problems that we had in March. Now, having said that, electronic equipment is still electronic equipment. Yes. And so there's a certain error rate. Then as it gets older, it's just like your computer or your car or anything else. And so what we have to do is be ready to react. So we've got a very complex infrastructure with phone banks and response teams and people out in the field to get out there in a timely fashion and to service equipment, with our TV repairmen as they go down. Sometimes I say that to my young people. I say that to Laura. I say TV repairman. She's like, "What's that?" They don't repair TVs anymore. They just throw them out. But so yeah, if that answers your question.
That's good news. Thank you for that. And the second short one, in the last several years, I've poll watched after being judges and all those kinds of things. And this is on chain of custody command. To give you an example, the last election in 2020, what are we doing to make sure that USB gets, and I'll give you this example. I was at a polling place, everything was done, we left out, went to the parking lot. The judge on purpose sat in that location for 3 hours. I sat in the parking lot for 3 hours. And I know what that was, hoping you'd just leave. We didn't. And we followed right behind her as she left the polling place. And and she does a little thing, of course it's dark. This is like 12:30 or 1 in the morning. And she loses us. I get to round table, and she shows up 30 minutes later. What steps are we taking to secure that USB? And I'll sit down and let you. Thank you.
I can tell you that one of the issues that I have with the state of Texas law is that the state of Texas gives an awful lot of authority to an election judge. And they pretty much are bulletproof. I can't fire them. And so every so often, I don't know this particular case, every so often we get a judge that has bad behavior. And there's little consequence to that. And so this sounds like this may be bad behavior, I don't know. But what we can do is what we try to do, we're tracking. And so we're tracking when that judge leaves, and we track when, not so much when they leave, but when they should be leaving, and when they get there. And if they're not getting there, we're calling them up. Where are you at? What's going on? Everybody's waiting for your results. And so we're doing a lot more of those analytics, to tracking. And then if we do have bad behavior, I think we had one judge, and this was interesting, and when we closed early voting for one of the elections this last year, they left at 7 o'clock and didn't get there till 1:30 in the morning. I think they went home and had dinner and took a nap and then brought their stuff in. And so what we're doing when that happens is we're reporting that to the parties, and we're saying, you got a bad judge here. You should get rid of him, because the parties have the authority to get rid of him. I don't. But the parties need that information, and so we're trying to provide that information, and we're basically grading people, giving the parties a grade of it. And we do that in many ways. There's lots of pieces of evidence. Are they filling out their checklist, and are they filling out the provisional ballots? Are they doing, all these pieces of evidence that kind of say this is a good judge or this is not such a good judge.
Next, as you're coming up, could I ask you to please give your name but not give a party affiliation? Absolutely. We have to remain totally nonpartisan in this.
Hi there, my name is Kathy Sweeney. I'm a resident and I work in Richardson. And first of all, thank you for all you do. Second, I have 2 short questions. First, with the fire at City Hall, I heard you allude to new polling places, but what's the plan to replace that large facility and the communication plan to get the word out to the...
You're standing in it.
I know, I heard you. I just want to hear it more.
I haven't seen, I want to see I think our people came out, toured it, inspected it. I haven't seen it yet because I knew I was coming out here today, but I heard it's a great facility. Parking's great. I think that we should be fine because Richardson's one of our high traffic locations.
Do you know what the communication plan for that is to people
sure,
that would
sure.
normally go to City Hall?
Well, because remember, one of the things, that $605,000 that we're spending, one of the main things that the messages is, think about it this way. Every election, locations drop for one reason or another, under construction, fire, whatever it might be. And so if you get in the habit of going to the same location, it may not be there. Now, if it's not there, there'll be a sign there that said, this location's closed, and here are the four nearest ones to here. And so that piece is there. But what we really want people to do is to get in the habit, before they go vote, go look and see, go to our website, look for those locations nearest you, and to find the ones that are active and open.
Super, thank you. So the next one's kind of specific, and you may or may not be able to answer it, but what are the specifics related to bringing a group of people in to vote at one time? So if someone wanted to collect people in a van or a bus or something like that, are there any restrictions to that, or
No.
Nothing at all?
No.
great. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
First of all, Mr. Scarpello, I would like to just say how much I appreciate you and appreciate all that you're doing. I know it's a tough job, and so I know you don't get a lot of appreciation. I've watched that online, and so I just wanted to take this opportunity to tell you that. Second of all, this is my polling location on Election Day, and so like you, I was hoping to maybe take a peek at where we're going to be doing that. As an election judge, there was something you said about the provisional ballots, so I'm just, as a training issue, you said that no one had to go down to cure a ballot. Is that changed? Because there was one reason you would need to come down and cure a ballot, and that was if you did not have proper identification.
Yeah, generally speaking, you don't, but there are certain, as you know, as a judge, there's all kinds of exceptions to the rule. And so I think that there are occasions where someone has to come to our location to provide the information.
Okay, well, I just wanted to ask that, as a training issue, because I'm going to be, having to do that. And, there's a lot of people in this room that aren't familiar with all that. The other thing, I actually just went to poll watcher training yesterday, and I went to a supplemental training. Oh, I forgot to say my name. I'm Carrie Gaines. I went to supplemental training, so I have not done the online for Secretary of State. And so when we're talking about privacy for voters, what I was told is a poll watcher cannot stand there and watch a person vote. They can watch everything else, but they can't actually stand there and watch somebody vote what they're doing. You agree with that?
Yes,
Okay.
because you don't want to invade their privacy
Right.
as they're casting a vote.
However, I did understand there was one exception to that. As we know, in the law, there's always an exception, is if a poll worker was assisting a voter, then they could do it to make sure that the poll worker was marking the ballot as the voter.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, if a voter brings in their own assistant, then the poll worker is not.
That's
Is that
also
correct?
correct,
Okay.
yeah.
Just want to confirm that. Now, I did actually have a question, and I think you were asked this when you first came on. I think as far as our vote, not only do we want it to count, or want it to be trusted, but we want it to count. And sometimes when other people vote that shouldn't vote, that devalues our vote. So I think you were asked early on about cleaning up the voter rolls. And I don't want to misquote you, but I think you said that wasn't a priority when you first came on. And I'm just wondering if maybe where we are in that process. Have we started cleaning up the voter rolls at this point?
Right. So the state of Texas joined a consortium that's called ERIC, and it's the Electronic Registration and Information something consortium, maybe. And it's like, think of it this way: we in the United States, there's no national database, so this is kind of a voluntary database, and I think there's probably 30 states, and Texas just joined it. And as part of that, there's certain things that you're supposed to do to make sure that it's intended to look for people who've crossed state lines. I've gone to this location, I've re-registered here. When in the past there wasn't necessarily a way for the old state to know that the person had moved. And so with ERIC, there's a lot more, requirements to pass that information back and forth between states. There's also the required use of national change of NCOA, national change of address by the U.S. Post Office. And so I think right now the state of Texas does an NCOA like once every 2 years. And they should be doing it once a month. Because what we want to know when people move. And typically they tell their credit card company that when they've moved, or they tell the post office when they've moved. They don't tell us. It's just the last thing in their mind. And so when we can use NCOA to find out when someone's moved, we can make sure that we send them there's a procedure. We send them a postcard and where they can answer it and confirm that they've made a move and stuff. But it just keeps the rolls cleaner. And so we're going to, if the state doesn't do it on a monthly basis after joining ERIC, after the November election, we're going to locally do that on a probably monthly or quarterly basis to try to keep the rolls cleaner. In addition to that, we do an ongoing, our voter registration manager does a really good job compared to a lot of other counties as far as just keeping on top of our address file, looking for those locations where it's a business address and things like that. And so we feel pretty good about our voter registration file, but it can always be better.
And I don't want to monopolize, but I'm asking a question for someone else. But I know this has been a question I hear a lot of people say, and I think I know your answer. I think I'm going to know your answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. There's a lot of talk, and I know we kind of have like a hybrid paper ballot, but a lot of people are wanting to go to paper ballot because they feel it's more secure. I know there's arguments on both sides. And I know we have a hybrid because when you print from the vote machine, it does print out what you said. I also always tell people to review that to make sure, because I just learned, I didn't realize, sometimes there's a calibration issue and it might not be on there. But and supposedly someone told me in one election that what they said they pushed didn't read out, so I always tell people to read it. So I know we kind of have a paper trail, but is there any way that, what procedures can we go through to try to get paper ballots, or is that just kind of a dead subject?
Well, I could list the positives and negatives of paper ballot versus electronic. Electronic's fast. Electronics, on the one hand, that's great. On the other hand, it's expensive. The other hand, it breaks down. Paper, it's slow. There's a paper trail either way. Paper, there's still an electronic element to paper ballots because they're still counted electronically.
Absolutely.
The one thing that I've run elections both ways. Frankly, this is the first jurisdiction I've been in that's been fully electronic. I've been a paper person most of my life. The one thing that I am absolutely dead set against that I would, probably resign if they went to, and that is if they go to hand-counted paper ballots. Because the one thing I know for sure is people can't count as good as computers. They make mistakes all the time. And so paper ballots I'm not against. Like I said, I could make arguments for paper, I can make arguments for electronic, but hand counting, no.
And I guess as a follow-up, how often do we keep the actual paper ballots? What's statutorily?
By law, we have to keep them 22 months.
22 months, okay. Is that your question? Okay, thank you.
Next.
My name is Barb Stauffer, and I've been an election judge for several years. I want to thank you for your new streamlined notebook for the judges, where you have checkout lists for opening and shutting. It has been most valuable for when you have new clerks that don't know the procedures and the processes. So thank you for doing that. It has been great.
You're welcome.
I do have several different questions. I was told that we've extended early voting times in the last 2 days from 9 to 9. I'm concerned about safety of being extended to the 9 hours and how late it is, then that the poll workers have to work beyond that. Can you tell me who made that decision and why?
I made that decision because what we found, as we do our projections, what we find is that more and more people in Dallas are voting early, and as opposed to voting on election day. And so what we want to do is, if we have, instead of having that, so we're open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So the last 2 days we're going to be open from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Because we don't want that person rushing home, because people always, inevitably, they put stuff off, right? I'm going to wait till the last day or two. And so we have this crush at 6 or 7 o'clock, and we end up, having a line, and then if someone's in line at 7 o'clock, they get to vote anyway. Right. And we end up being open till 8:15 because there's this line anyway. Well, we want to, rather than having that kind of reactionary approach, we want to prepare for that crush at the end.
For myself, I'm a procrastinator, so I will wait until the last that I have to do it. So you're going to 9 o'clock, just moves it all back a couple more hours. And we already have 2 weeks of early voting that I think really does offer everybody the chance to get in there and vote within that time frame. Again, it's the importance that a person places on that vote and getting out to vote that I see. The next thing I have, drop boxes were a major issue around the country. Will Dallas County have those for this November election?
We are not allowed to have drop boxes in the state of
Just wanted
Texas.
to make sure that was noted. And let's see, cameras, you mentioned cameras being installed. Where are the cameras?
So we have cameras, there's anywhere where we handle ballots. And so like on our loading dock, where we store the ballots, where we process the ballots. To be honest with you, we got cameras everywhere. We got probably 200 cameras between our two buildings, 170 cameras. But the ones that are streamed, wherever we handle ballots. So there's probably, I think we probably got 6 or 7 locations that we stream. We don't want to stream everything because it's just too confusing to people, but where we're in that central count area, for instance, there's cameras where you can see everything that's going on on election night.
Okay, I think that's very, very important. And you mentioned the fact that you've now changed the process where it's election department people that will be in that central counting room versus the vendor.
That's correct.
Thank you very much for making that change. Thanks again.
My name is Mark Stager. I'm a resident of Richardson. I want to thank you for being here. I understand that parents and teachers and school administrators are growing increasingly concerned that schools are used as vote centers. The school district says they have no choice in the matter, that as a public building, they have to be open to voting if they are requested to be. And so my question is, well, I guess before my question, I understand that decision comes from Dallas County Votes. They decide where the polling places are going to be. So Dallas County Votes asks the school district to make schools available. The school district has to. And you, as the Dallas County voting administrator, I'm assuming you're the one who makes the final call on whether schools are used as polling places. So my question is, what are you doing to try to minimize calling on schools to do that? And how successful have you been in reducing the number of schools used as vote centers?
First off, you're incorrect. I do not make that call. That call is made, what we use for polling places in Dallas County, the Vote Center Advisory Committee studies it, and then they make a recommendation to Commissioner's Court, and Commissioner's Court votes. And they tell me where the polling places are going to be, and I just run them. And so that was done in 2019, and we haven't changed since. We're still using the same votes. Now, this coming winter, we're going to take a look at that again and analyze and see whether or not Commissioner's Court wants to change those locations. So as far as, I know what's happening, and I know the concerns, and I appreciate the concerns of schools. And I think some school districts are closing, not having school on election day, and that's one of the ways that they're taking care of it. But then what we're trying to do is to, because you are correct in that if the county chooses to use a school, the school has to comply. And so what we want to do is to not ignore the school's concerns. We want to make sure that we have a good security plan in place. And so that's why we're working so hard working with law enforcement, working with one of our vendors, working with every county agency, working with every law enforcement agency, and there's a lot in this county, to try to really have a integrated plan for our security for Election Day.
Okay, thank you. So, as I understand it, if the schools, parents, teachers want to pressure the government to not use schools, we need to go to the Commissioner's Court, get them to
That would be correct.
change it. Thank you.
Okay, our last person with questions.
Hello, I'm Susan Fisher, and you talked about the 2020 audit, and I'm wondering when that'll be finished, and is it an internal, external audit? Who's doing the audit? And if you hold the records for 22 months, have any of those records been destroyed because we're getting close to that 22-month period.
We're past that 22-month period, and none of those records have been destroyed because we're in 5 lawsuits. And there's a litigation hold on all of our records, so we can't get rid of any of those records. But the audit, as far as the audit goes, that is being conducted by the Secretary of State's office. They audited 4 counties. They've created an audit division of their department, and they're going to audit 4 counties every election now. I think it was Harris, Collin, Tarrant, and us for the 2020, and for 2022, it's Harris again, and then 3 other counties. I can't remember who they are, but we won't be audited for 2022.
And I just looked on the RISD website, and they are closed on Election Day and have a teacher in service going on. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Scarpello, thank you so much for attending. We've gone over our time, and I'm sorry about that, but it's been very informative, and we thank you. Also, thanks to Ms. Garcia and Ms. Varela for the Dallas County elections for coming today. There is information on the table in the back that, actually it's on all your tables now, with the dates for the upcoming election. If you need to register to vote, please see us. That's one of the things that we do. Remember, you do need to re-register to vote if you have changed your name or if you have moved. A lot of people don't realize that. Thank you so much for coming, everybody, and see you at the polls.
Thank you all.
Well, thank you very much.